during curfew hours, as was done over the last 2 weeks. To be clear, on no movement days, persons will be allowed to seek urgent medical care, and those who have overseas travel plans can make their way to and from the airport. Essential services will be operational, and in this group, I include our fisher folk, farmers, our factories, BPOs, and those involved in the maintenance of infrastructure and for financial services, and indeed the media. But I remind those persons employed to essential services who must move on the no movement days to ensure that you have your ID to present to the police in case you are stopped. Even in this group, those persons who can work from home should do so and only travel if necessary. We have heard the concerns of our frontline workers about obtaining meals while on duty on no movement days. We will allow the JCF, the JDF, private security personnel, the fire brigade, doctors, nurses, pharmacists, or other persons properly identified, employed to the hospital or engaged by the Ministry of Health in the vaccination process to be served at the premises of food establishments which are registered under the ENS program, that is the e-commerce national delivery system, during curfew and no movement days. Just to give you a brief update on the ENS continues to be operational, and we encourage persons to use the system. Businesses and delivery operators registered on the ENS program will be able to operate after curfew until midnight on no movement days. Work from home. The existing work from home directive in the public sector is being extended until September 17, 2021. Again, I urge permanent secretaries and heads of agencies to strictly ensure that only persons who work in critical service delivery, and the nature of their work is such that it requires them to be physically present at the office or plant, that only those persons be allowed to come to work. For the private sector, I again use a strong appeal to employers to ensure that only persons who cannot work from home actually come into your workplaces. For places of worship, and I've seen the appeals of our pastors saying, look, we have these large spaces and we could accommodate more persons. We have been very faithful in observing the rules and so forth. I quite well understand that it is not our intention to deprive anyone of their right to worship, but it is just necessary for the management of the pandemic. Schools would have the same argument. See, we have these schools that are in rural areas that are empty, and many of them are underpopulated. Why can't we have schools? It's the same principle that applies. So for places of worship, the same arrangements that were in place over the last 2 Sundays to facilitate Sunday worship will remain in place for Sunday, September 5 and Sunday, September 12. Persons who leave home on these 2 Sundays will have to carry on their person an authorization form as included in the Gazette, issued by their place of worship. In respect of funerals, weddings, AGMs, or other gatherings, the same provisions remain in place as obtained over the past 2 weeks. Just a quick update on vaccination. As of today, 549,837 doses of vaccines have been administered, and over 408,000 Jamaicans would have by now received at least 1 dose. I'm glad that we have been seeing an increase in uptake of the vaccine in recent days. Earlier today, I visited St. Thomas, and Minister Tufton, who is online, is in Hanover, which is why he's not here with us. And we chose those 2 parishes because when we examine the data for take-up, Hanover and St. Thomas had the 2 lowest percentages for take-up. So it does select those two parishes select themselves for special and direct attention to get that population to take the vaccine. I believe that there are a number of Jamaicans who have questions and concerns about the vaccine and how it may affect them. And in fact, that's what we have seen when we have moved about and engaged with the people. I haven't come upon any hardened, strong anti-vaxxer. Obviously, there are persons who hold these strong views, and I respect your views. It's not my intention to try and convince you. My intention is to present you with the information. But we have met upon more persons who simply just do not know, and that lack of knowledge leads to a lack of action on their part. They just don't know, and they have questions. So we met upon a lady who, for example, said, well, I have a situation and I have to check before. And obviously she had a heart condition and she was uncertain. So my advice to her was, go and talk to your doctor just to be sure. But, if you were to contract the disease with your heart condition, your probability of a fatal event is far higher than if you had the vaccine. Obviously, we are not doctors, so we can't give any medical advice. We're merely presenting the information as documented and packaged by the Ministry of Health, and we are there giving moral suasion and encouragement. I note the concerns raised by the opposition spokesman on health, and some calls that have been made to talk show about us moving around during this period. It should be noted that our movements are well regulated and controlled within the protocols, and everyone who is around us, certainly my team, is vaccinated. We all wear masks. We all, as best as possible, try to maintain the social distance. I wasn't 100% satisfied with actually visiting the vaccination site, which is quite different from the tour. When we went there, the sites were crowded. People were coming out. And we have seen this right across the country as people turn out to get vaccinated. It is part of the risk. And we will be meeting with the Ministry of Health to have that special discussion about how do we control the sites. We will be saying some more about how we're going to be managing the vaccination process, just to make sure that it is safe, it meets the standards, but also that it is convenient. So from our perspective, the urgent and critical and immediate priority is to increase the number of vaccinations. And I make the point to you that a couple of days ago, we did 20,000. Another couple of days ago, we did 12. Today, we had 5,000. So, we need to be out there mobilizing. There is a sense that fear is going to drive people to take the vaccine. Fear will only carry you so far. It is knowledge and empowerment by knowledge that will keep the numbers and the take-up very high. So we have to continue with our program, but we do so with the greatest respect for the protocols and the safety of all involved. In order to ramp up our vaccination program, after discussions with the Ministry of Health and with some of our stakeholders, we have concluded on a methodology. So we have a vaccination plan which has already been announced. Now we have to operationalize that plan. We have to put in place the structures and the mechanisms to make sure that the plan works. The plan, and so far in terms of its operationalization, has largely depended wholly and solely on the Ministry of Health. Now we have to expand that plan with the supervision and direction and standards and the parameters set by the Ministry of Health and regulated by the Ministry of Health. But it is clear that if we're going to meet the vaccination goals, we have to pull in more stakeholders. And it is always very difficult because you have entrenched positions. People have perspectives on how things should be done. People have professional positions on how things should be done, and others have what they consider to be practical positions on how things should be done. And the dynamics and the politics of that is not always easy to navigate. And so, yes, there might have been a little bit of slowness in how we resolve that, but I think we are close to coming to a point now where we would have a very robust, well thought out system of expanding and ramping up the vaccination operationalization plan. And so you're going to see outsourcing and contracting of the service, and you will see that commence very soon. An announcement should be made. You will see that go through a procurement process of bringing in private contractors, and that will obviously include members of the private medical profession who would come in and assist. We have scaled up the involvement of the private sector through what is called the Private Sector Vaccination Initiative, and that is going to be focused on a sectoral industry approach. So, for example, in collaboration with the private sector, we want to rapidly increase vaccination in the tourism sector. And you can see strategically why you'd want to do that. We'd rapidly want to increase vaccination in the BPO sector. These are kind of closed ecosystems that have everything for them to operate. And if they are in a closed ecosystem and they are fully vaccinated, the impact of what you would call, national measures would be less on them because they have reached that level of immunity. We're looking at, the construction industry, financial services, quick services, retail, private security. And I see the Minister of Education here, and she's saying, what about education? What about education? Yes, the Ministry of Education, Youth and Information, and the Ministry of Health and Wellness will continue to ramp up the school-based vaccination program, Minister, to facilitate a return to face-to-face learning for schools that are able to achieve vaccination rates of 65% or more. So you will hear more about that from the Minister of Education. We take the view that, schools are a very good point of organization. And if you bring in the principals, they are able, more than anyone else, to mobilize parents and teachers to come and take, and students, obviously, to come and take the vaccines. So, friends, fellow Jamaicans, Jamaican family, it is a difficult time. In driving here, I heard an excellent interview by one of our nation's highly regarded psychiatrist, psychologist, saying that, the mental health, we should pay attention to that during the pandemic. And it's a serious point. And I know that many people are panicking. Many persons are distressed. And a lot of people just don't know what to believe, what to think. But someone who was also being interviewed said something that's very important, that now is not the time to panic. And it is one thing that I don't do ever, is to panic. And I don't think that Jamaica should panic. We have this situation under control. It is not a situation where obviously we have all the variables under control. It is not a situation where things have not happened that should not have happened. But in general, I think we have done what is necessary to bring the situation under control and to rapidly bend this curve. And I think that the measures that are in place, and you would have seen, it is doing that. But just quickly to add to that, it is not a time for us to relax. We have to drive through with these measures. We will bring the numbers down. And when we bring it down, I'm certain that we will end this argument about opening up and then having to close down. I think after this episode, there will have to be a greater balance and understanding that sectoral interests can't push the government into decisions that affect the entire society. this is a democracy, and this government more than any listens to the people. But at the same time, we have powerful interests. And when the consequences come, you can't find anybody. It wasn't their fault. They didn't ask for it. They didn't play any role in it. They didn't keep what they used to keep. But their voice was very loud in asking for and demanding even, protesting even, for us to reopen the economy. I have to make these political points because nobody else is making them. But I am very frank, as you know, and I'm going to call it as it is. There will be a different type of management of the pandemic going forward. This hide-and-seek business, opening up, closing down, can't work. Economy can't work like that. So the solution is for us to take the vaccines. I'm being clear on that we are going to push very hard to empower our people with information until we have the majority of Jamaicans taking the vaccines. At which point, we will push even harder to have those of our brothers and sisters who are resistant and reluctant, to encourage them strongly to take the vaccines. In closing, this morning in my usual reading, I came across an article, just as I had come across an article on the current strain. There is a new strain being studied in South Africa. So what it is saying to us is that as we are here, skirting around the issue of vaccines, there is a population remaining which will be the source of new strains of the virus coming into being. And I just have to call it as it is. Yes, we are a democracy. Yes, you're free to say what you have to say. But I also have a responsibility. As you can preach your message of dystopia and disruption and subversiveness, I will be as loud, I will be as strong in preaching the message of us being wise to the problem, of us being responsible to each other, and of us being smart enough to do what is necessary to preserve our life, our way of life, and our freedoms. My brothers and sisters, I thank you for listening, and I beseech you, take the vaccines.
Thank you so much, Prime Minister. Ahead of our start, we did indicate to members of the media that we had an extensive media briefing in St. Thomas this afternoon, which we will also be sharing online for the members of the public to see. So at this time, we'll take one question from the media and one from a member of the public. Let me start, Prime Minister, with from the member of the public, and I think this is a concern for so many Jamaicans. Keisha N. Hutch on Twitter is asking, will the first day of the new school year be changed? And then we'll ask the Minister of Education, Youth and Information, the Honorable Favour Williams, to respond to that. And we also welcome the Honorable Dr. Horace Chang, the Deputy Prime Minister, who is also here with us. Minister Williams.
Sure. Thank you, Naomi. Well, actually, today, Monday, today's 1st of September, is the official start of the new school year. Monday, September 6th, will be the first teaching day of the year, and school will be opened in the virtual space for all our students. And if you are not able to be in the virtual space, then we have other platforms through which we will be providing education to our students. We continue to have our audiovisual platforms. We'll continue to have the students with their workbooks and textbooks, and teachers will continue to be in touch with their students so that they can collect work, market, return, and so on. It's the platforms that you're used to last year that we have to continue to use this year until we are able to add the face-to-face component for the school year.
Thank you, Minister. And of course, the Prime Minister as well had noted that the distribution of tablets and laptops to students in need will also continue. Thank you, Minister. And now a question from the media. May I invite Mr. Damian Mitchell of the Gleaner to pose his question, and then we'll close for the evening, given the meetings the Prime Minister has. And of course, we had an extensive media briefing in St. Thomas today. Mr. Mitchell?
Thank you very much, Naomi. Prime Minister, you have consistently said that the government had been expecting a third wave of COVID. Can you say exactly how you had been preparing?
Once a new strain was identified and we started to see a third wave emerging in other countries, we made that disclosure here that we would not be immune from a third wave. And when that understanding took place, the mobilizations would have started for beds. You would recall that in the peak of the last outbreak, our bed count was 600. I think we went up to as high as 650. I think you would see that our current bed count, help me out here, Pierce, it's about 725. So we have been increasing our bed count, and we continue to increase our bed counts. We have field hospitals which are now being mobilized. Those were impacted because, I gather, for weather reasons, and the CMO and the PS can give you more information about that. In terms of oxygen, which is the issue that seems to be of grave concern, I read a report from the CMO explaining what the third wave could look like. I won't give any details of it. The CMO is in the best place to give you details on the report, but I'm certain that you would have seen some of the projections. And my understanding is that that projection would have been shared. There would have been understanding reached. And I wished here to say that our partners in providing us with oxygen, IGL, with as much challenges that we have had, given the size of their plant and the unpredictable nature of the spikes, and indeed of the supplies, that they have been very faithful to us in trying to source supplies, even when their own supply chain has been disrupted. So, the question about planning for the spike and planning for the supply, it's a very tricky one, because even in countries where they have plants with massive capacities and more resources than us, I'm seeing Florida, I'm seeing Alabama, I'm seeing other states, I'm seeing other countries, where even those rich countries and rich states have these challenges. In fact, I'm reliably told that there was a disruption in the supply chain for oxygen for Jamaica. Not that we were having an oversupply, that's not the case. We were right at the brink. But at the brink, can you imagine, there comes a disruption in the supply chain. I don't want to get too much into what that disruption is, but obviously the suppliers there had to use the resources that they have, which would have come to Jamaica, to supply the needs in their own country. And our partners, IGL, had to find other suppliers. They did so in Trinidad, and I want to thank the government of Trinidad. We have reached out to the government of Trinidad to have a firm relationship with them in terms of becoming suppliers for us, given that we have this situation in our normal course. So from a government to government perspective, we're tying that down. So from that perspective, I think there is a movement to blame and argue and quarrel. That is important because we need to get at the root cause of problems. So that's not saying that we shouldn't do that, but I'm saying that in the midst of a pandemic, what is important is that everyone who was involved worked very hard so that when there is this force majeure, this act of God, this unforeseen circumstances where the supply chain was disrupted, in a day, we were able to make connections, and then in the following day, you would have seen the videos where our port workers, our customs, our security forces work overtime to have the containers come here with oxygen. Now, that's not a solution long-term to the problem. It just stops the gap. But the government is working behind the scenes with our partners to ensure that we can have a more robust solution. And that is the logistics involved in that is immense. It requires greater coordination with the Ministry of Health and the partners in terms of analyzing the numbers, greater coordination with shipping. But then there is a long-term problem. And the long-term problem is, how do we size the plant that we have to meet the demand going forward? And I think the suppliers want to have a better understanding of what will our supplies be, let's say, in the next year. Would it justify an investment in increasing the size of their plant? And then from our point, we need to find other sources. Now, I want us to be clear. It doesn't really matter which source you find. Once they need their oxygen, then you are at peril. So there are other solutions too, which we are exploring. Well, not exploring, we are on that path in terms of increasing the number of oxygen concentrators. I received a report from the CMO of what is on order, what they have spec'd out to go into procurement. And I personally, through sources overseas, working through our ambassador and through our consul general in New York, we have, I would say at this point, secured some close to 80, 90 oxygen concentrators. So in addition to what the Ministry of Health is procuring and what we're getting from support from the diaspora, we should be able to have a good amount of concentrators in the system. Now, you will know that the concentrators don't solve the problem fully. The concentrators are good for persons who have, mild but not serious COVID symptoms. People who have serious symptoms would still need to rely on that bulk high flow nasal oxygen. But certainly, you wouldn't have this pressure on the system for persons who are mild. So we are activated. And I'm not telling you that the system is perfect, but for those who would want to present a fatalistic view, that is absolutely not the case. And I think for those whose, it would seem to me, deliberate intent is to spread fear and to diminish confidence in our system in the time of a pandemic, shame on you. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Prime Minister. Thank you to members of the public, members of the media for joining us this evening for this brief media briefing. Thank you too to the Deputy Prime Minister of Jamaica, the Honourable Dr. Horace Chang, along with other ministers who are here, the Honourable Favour Williams, the Honourable Desmond McKenzie, and the Honourable Christopher Tufton, who joined on our Zoom platform, as well as all the members of the team from the Ministry of Health. Again, the Prime Minister announcing that there will be an extension of the measures, particularly to the 3 consecutive no movement days that will again begin this weekend, starting Sunday through to Tuesday, and of course the following weekend. We thank you so much. We ask that you be safe, and we'll join you again next time. Good evening.